Fact remains that many of today's problems in these countries, including the persistence, in some cases the creation of racial and ethnic and religious tensions, were the direct result of the colonial experience. So there is a moral debt that needs to be paid. It's been pointed out, for example, the dehumanization of Africans in the Caribbean, the massive psychological damage that has been done, the undermining of social traditions, of property rights, of the authority structures of these societies, all in the interests of British colonialism. You're not responsible for the people starving in Somalia, but you give them aid. Surely the principle of reparations for the wrongs that have been done cannot be denied. India's share of the world economy when Britain arrived on its shores was 23%. By the time the British left, it was down to below 4%. Britain's industrial revolution was actually premised upon the deindustrialization of India. By the end of the 19th century, the fact is that India was already Britain's biggest cash cow, the world's biggest purchaser of British goods and exports, and the source of highly paid employment for British civil servants. We literally paid for our own oppression. Staying with India, between 15 and 29 million Indians died of starvation in British-induced famines. The most famous example, of course, was the Great Bengal famine during the Second World War, when 4 million people died because Winston Churchill deliberately, as a matter of written minuted policy, proceeded to divert essential supplies from civilians in Bengal to sturdy Tommies and Europeans as reserve stockpiles. Violence and racism were the reality of the colonial experience, and no wonder that the sun never set on the British Empire, because even God couldn't trust the English in the dark. But let me quantify World War I for you. Again, I'm sorry, from an Indian perspective, others have spoken of other countries. 1/6 of all the British forces that fought in the war were Indian. 54,000 Indians actually lost their lives in that war. 65,000 were wounded. Another 4,000 remained missing or in prison. Indian taxpayers had to cough up £100 million in that time's money. There was reference to democracy and rule of law. Let me say with the greatest possible respect, it's a bit rich to oppress, enslave, kill, torture, maim people for 200 years and then celebrate the fact that they're democratic at the end of it.
What you've just heard is not just a speech, it's a reckoning, a reminder that the British Empire was not the benevolent force some still claim it to be. It was a machine built on extraction, subjugation, and systematic erasure of identity. India was not some barren, undeveloped land waiting to be civilized. It was rich, economically, culturally, intellectually. And yet, by the time the British left, it was stripped. Its people left to rebuild from ruin. But India wasn't alone. Across the African continent, in countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, stories echo of stolen minerals, destroyed industries, and generations denied education or dignity. We're often told that colonization brought railways, language, and law, as if theft is made noble by leaving behind a train station. But infrastructure built to export wealth isn't generosity, it's strategy, it's control. And then there's the human cost. Millions conscripted into world wars, not to protect their homes, but to defend an empire that never considered them equals. Famines that killed millions weren't accidents. They were policies. Churchill's choices, for example, are no footnote. They're testimony to the cost of imperial arrogance. Reparations are not about revenge. They're about truth, about accountability, about confronting the fact that some nations got rich because others were robbed. And to this day, many former colonies still feel the weight of that injustice, economically, socially, and psychologically. And today, we see the aftershocks in the heart of Europe. Immigration isn't a crisis, it's a consequence. The UK and France once went out into the world, drew borders, exploited nations, and claimed ownership over lives and lands. Now generations from those same nations are coming to Europe, not to take, but because they were once taken from. You cannot colonize half the world, shape its future, and then act surprised when that world arrives at your doorstep. The discomfort we see in today's immigration debates is not about borders, it's about history, and whether we're ready to take responsibility for it. This video is intended for educational purposes only. It aims to shed light on historical events and their lasting impact through documented facts and public.
Please like and subscribe.